Hey everyone, it's Ryan with The Smart House, and today we're going to go ahead and do another one of our basics videos. This one is how to wire in a smart switch. Now the exact type of smart switch really doesn't matter for what we're going to be doing today. This is sort of universal for all smart switches that require a neutral wire. So whether it's Zigbee, Z-Wave, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, whatever it happens to be, it'll be the same method to actually wire it in physically to your wall. So a lot of people are intimidated when they're getting into their house's wiring, but you don't really need to be, because as long as you follow safety standards, you should be good to go. So why would you choose something like a smart switch rather than a handful of smart bulbs? So in my house, I have a lot of series of lights. So for example, in my living room, I have 4 lights over the living room. The kitchen has 4 lights. There are sections of my house that have large groups of lights. Instead of replacing each individual bulb with a smart bulb to be able to individually control them, I'd rather control them at the wall so I can turn them all on and off as a group. This saves you a bit of money if you're talking about replacing a number of bulbs in a particular series. The second thing is you get to maintain local control. And what this means is if your home automation system is down, you can still walk up to the wall and turn the lights on or off. If you have guests over and people who aren't comfortable with your home automation system, they can just go up and turn the switch on and off like a normal switch. If you have a smart bulb and you turn off power to it, you can't control it anymore. With the smart switch, you can hit the off button and it's still going to work the next time you want to turn it on automatically. And also, if you have something like a custom light fixture, like a chandelier or a fixture over your kitchen table, you don't want to have to replace all the custom bulbs in that one. Or if it has a large number of small bulbs, you can use one of these smart switches to control the whole thing. So the inspiration for this particular project came last year when we decided to convert our basement into more of a soft play area for our kids. We've got a small trampoline down there, some mats, carpets, things like that, so the kids can go down there and play on super hot summer days or really cold winter days. Now I want to be able to turn off these lights remotely because the kids have a tendency to leave those lights on all the time. Plus I can control it when I open the door into the basement, the lights come on automatically. So in this particular video, I'm going to show you how to install a GE Hasco dimmer switch that's a Z-Wave. It doesn't really matter which one it is. That's a particular brand and style that I use in my house. But again, you can apply this to any other type of switch that you want to. Now, because there's a limitless combination of switches, technologies, and home automation systems, I'm not going to show you how to set this switch up in your home automation system, but I can record a video on Home Assistant or Smart Things later on if you all would like me to. So now, the majority of today's video I actually recorded over a year ago. So in 2020 during lockdown, I decided to go ahead and record this how-to section of the video. Never got around to finish editing it. So you might notice that obviously I'll look a little different in the video because it was last year. The video quality is not the same, the audio quality is not the same, and I went ahead and redid the audio in a certain section. So if it looks a little jarring, that's why. The information is still relevant, I just didn't get the editing done in time. And also, if you're looking for any of the tools that I'm using today, whether it's multimeters or screwdrivers, I have a link here below to my electrical kit. This is all the electrical tools that I use. Most of them can be purchased from Home Depot or Amazon. I've got links to those in this kit below. All right, let's go over some safety items before we jump into the actual installation of the switch. All right, so real quick, let's go ahead and talk safety. So first thing I want to note is make sure you check your local, state, county, principality, whatever rules and regulations on electrical wiring in your house. My experience is mostly from here locally in Missouri, United States. So make sure you check your local codes and ordinances. They may have different rules on who can do what type of wiring. If you need to have an electrician check something, make sure you check those before you get started. So first of all, I'm not an electrician. I'm just a hobbyist. So take what I say with a grain of salt. If you want to check anything that I say, please do so. Talk to a friend that's an electrician, go to Home Depot or Lowe's, ask them questions. A lot of times at those places, they do have master electricians on staff. So if you do run into a weird problem, snap a picture, take it up and ask them, how do I wire this in? They may not know much about smart switches, but they will be able to tell you how to properly wire something in or deal with a weird electrical situation. So everything I'm going to show you today is based on US North American electrical grid, electrical codes. So if you happen to not live in one of those regions, make sure that you adapt it to what you're doing. So for example, UK has a different voltage, some countries have different frequencies, they have different wiring color, the EU has a whole different wiring color standard. So if you're in one of those countries, make sure that you adapt this to your particular area. And if you run into a weird issue, like I said, feel free to reach out to local resources that you may have around you. Ask in the Home Assistant Discord or forum, or if you'd like to, go ahead and jump into our Discord for this smart house, and I'll be happy to help you if I can. If it is something US based, I'll be able to answer a question there for you. But there are a lot of resources out there, so don't be discouraged if you run into a weird or strange issue. And lastly, please don't sue me. Let's go ahead and jump into the tabletop exercise. So I've set up an example of what a circuit looks like on a tabletop, and that way we can more easily see how to get this set up without being crammed against a wall. All right, so I have set up here kind of an example of what a home house, a basic light circuit's going to be. I've got the power coming in, which obviously this will be going to a breaker, but I've got it just wired into an extension cord now, going through a standard house switch, and then connected to just a simple light bulb fixture. First thing you got to do is determine where your fuse box is or breaker box. In my house, it's right over there. We should turn off the circuit for the lighting area that you're trying to work with. And in my case, obviously, it's the room I'm in, so it's very easy for me to turn that switch off, the breaker off, and then see the lights turn out. So it's a good simple test just to make sure you're kind of in the right ballpark. In that case, I'm going to kind of simulate that by unplugging this. So flip the breaker off, and that would turn off the light. And then the next thing you want to do is you're going to need to confirm that that's actually off. I typically like to use one of these non-contact voltage sensors. Very simple. I think they're about $20 on Amazon or your Home Depot, Lowe's, whatever. Basically, it has a small sensor on it that indicates the light turns red, that indicates the presence of voltage. So I'm going to move over here, and my extension cord has voltage. So you see it flashing. You can alternatively use a digital multimeter. I have a cheap one here it's a Craftsman. You want to make sure you set it in voltage AC mode. This one does have a non-contact voltage sensor on it. I don't really trust it all that much. I usually like to use the probes, which I'll show you how to do that later. In the case of my switch, I'll go ahead and take the cover off and show you inside. Normally, you would be still connected to a breaker, so you wouldn't be 100% sure that this was live or not. Always treat a circuit as live until you are sure it's not live. I connect it back on again and say the switch is off. So when I get close to the line voltage, it'll turn red, indicating that there's presence of voltage. So if I were to touch that, it would shock me. That's how you use one of these. Make sure you test it with something. If you do have a digital multimeter, you can take the multimeter, switch it to AC mode, and then take your black probe, put it on the ground or on any ground in the house, and then take your red probe and touch it to what circuit you're trying to test. In this case, I'm on the line side, and it is showing a voltage of 106 volts. So there is line voltage here, so I know that this is not safe to work on yet. Go ahead and disconnect the power, and then when I come back, and again, I'll check with my non-contact probe, and the light stays green. I'll check with my digital multimeter, and I will check there, and I'm getting a nominal no voltage, so we know we're safe. So now we can proceed to work on it. In a typical light switch like this, you're going to have 3 wires that come out, both on the line and the load side. And so as I explained earlier, the line side is what's coming from your breaker, the line voltage coming in, and the load is what's going out to the light. Usually your line side is going to be on the bottom. So if this was mounted, this where the wires are would be the top, this would be the bottom. So if this was mounted to the wall, typically your load side is going to be on the top and your line side is going to be on the bottom. This is important because a standard switch doesn't care which orientation it's in because it's just connecting 2 wires together. But a smart switch needs to actually have the line connected at all times so that there's power to the onboard circuit so it can communicate and you can control it. Without that, then it would only work when the wires are closed, when the circuit's closed. That's why you need a neutral wire on most of these, is because it uses the neutral wire to connect between the line to provide voltage to the unit itself so it can stay powered, so that you're able to control it from your home automation system. In this case, we've already checked this is safe. So I'm going to go ahead and take off the switch. Most of them will be this dual-headed screw. Sometimes you'll find they'll be stripped out if people have taken these in and out quite a bit. So just be cautious. So I'm going to go ahead and open it up here. You'll notice that there are 3 colors of wire. And again, this is US, North America standard. There's a black, there's a white, and then there's copper. This copper is unjacketed. This copper is the grounding or earthing. It is it's kind of the safety circuit in case something gets fried. The voltage will have some place to go to ground. And like I stated before, you've got the black indicating hot, and then the white indicating neutral. So in a standard box, as you can see here, the neutral is not actually in use. So most of the time it's not in use unless you have something like a smart switch. So in this case, you'll want to look and see which one's line and which one's load. Make sure you mark it or remember it somehow which one's line and load. If you don't have a flag or a tape, usually what I'll do is just take the line side off and then leave the load side connected to the old switch, and then you can move it later on. So we'll go ahead and take the screw off. There are multiple types of switches that you'll find. Some of them have these quick in connectors that sort of, you take a stripped wire, you stick it in there, and it grabs on. You'll kind of see that this one's been snipped off. This is an old switch of mine. If you run into those, usually I find it easier just to cut it off because I don't really use these types of switches. You'll also find like these, the shepherd's hook, that kind of go over the lugs. In that case, with the shepherd's hook, I usually don't bother straightening it out because you won't really get it that straight. So usually I'll use my nippers and just go ahead and cut the shepherd's hook off. I'll take a pair of wire strippers. Make sure to kind of figure out what gauge it is. This is 14 gauge wire, so there's a little 14 notch right there. So I know kind of where to strip it. It's solid core wire, so it's pretty robust. The instructions say about 5/8 of an inch stripped off the end. That's, I usually do anywhere 2.5 and 3/4. Just long enough to be able to actually reach inside of these little connectors. So these are similar to those grab-on ones I was telling you about, except for you can control the tension by screwing on the lugs. So in this case, I'm going to locate the line input here, take my smart switch and go ahead and slide it in there. You want to make sure that you have enough exposed copper that it's actually going to make contact inside. So if you slide it in there and it seems to take a lot more of the jacket there, you can kind of mark it with your thumb now and then come back and strip out a little bit more. You want to make sure that you have just the edge of the jacket actually reaches in, so that way you don't have any exposed copper coming out of here, so there's not a risk of shorting. So go ahead and slide that in there, and then take a standard Phillips head screwdriver or a regular one and go ahead and tighten it down. Once that tightens down, it's going to be nice and snug, so you don't have to worry about it going anywhere. Then I'll come in and grab the other side of the existing switch, which again is the load side. So that way I know that I won't have it backwards. It's not that big of a deal. Worst case scenario, you will plug it in or you'll turn power back on again, and you won't have power on your smart switch. So I'll go ahead and take that out. Again, cut the shepherd's hook off and strip down about 3/4 of an inch. So I should mention it's a good idea to wear safety glasses while using a wire stripper or cutter, because those little pieces of copper can catch in the eye. So bad me for not wearing my PPE. So I'll go ahead and put the load side in and tighten down as before. And then go ahead and take the grounding wire off. You don't need to worry about it right now. We'll get to it later because it's very easy to tell because it's just bare copper and usually really long. So take that off. And again, you can cut that off because it does have a little insert here. So now we have to work with the neutral. Now, on most smart switches in the box will come a small length of white wire that is used to extend the neutral. Because you don't have a wire you're replacing, since it's not in use, you can get that small chunk of white wire and connect it in here. So I didn't have that wire that came with it, so I went ahead and made my own. Just take a small chunk of white wire, make sure it's white. If it's not, you have to label both ends with electrical tape in white to indicate you changed the color. What I typically do is connect this to the smart switch first, because it's much easier to manipulate the small piece of wire once it's already into your switch here. So we'll go ahead and tighten that down. Now we will take where this wire nut is. You'll notice the white wire is all nutted together. So I'll take this wire nut off and should clip that down. So you're going to be taking this existing wire and you're going to put it into the bundle. Now, some people just shove it in there and twist it. That's not a good idea. You want to use a pair of pliers. I don't have my electrician's pliers with me, but these will work. And go ahead and pre-twist it to the right. That way you get good contact between all the connectors in the bundle here. So again, I've got these wires here. Sometimes you need to trim the new wire a little bit longer so you have some extra room here. So I've got all three of these conductors, so I'll go ahead and just grab them. And again, this is much easier if you have the proper tools, but I don't have that with me right now. So I'm going to go and twist these together. And that way they'll kind of situate together, because what you're doing with the wire nut effectively is just twisting all of these together. So I've got those twisted in a bundle, as you can see here. Sorry if I'm not keeping this centered. And then I'll go ahead and twist the wire nut back on there. You want to keep this spinning around until you feel it grip and kind of start tightening down. If it skips and it doesn't do that, you want to start over again, because it actually has threads in there, and it'll cut those threads on the outside of the wire. So you get it nice and tight. So the connector's all in there. All right. Last thing you want to make sure you don't forget is the ground wire. So again, I'm going to take this small twisted section where the shepherd hook was, cut that off, and then we will put that into the top of the smart switch here. There's a little small hole here, so we'll go ahead and slide that in and tighten down like we do with the rest of them. Now, you want to make sure that you get all of the wires back into the switch. Make sure they're in there. One of the things you'll notice is this is a lot bigger than your existing switch. So if you have a ton of extra wire in your box, you're going to have a little bit of trouble getting everything to fit back in there. I always find myself cramming wires back in the back, and it's not a good idea because things do slip out and become disconnected or get shorted. So try to bend your wires back the way you took them out. So in this case, I've just really got the only bundle I have here is the neutral. So I'll go ahead and bend that and put back in place. Same thing with the ground connector. So once those all get in there, we'll go ahead and push that into the box. Make sure it retracts all the way in. On the G switches, you'll notice there are these metal fins on the side here. If you're putting just a single switch in a single box, you don't have to worry about those. If you have multiple smart switches in a box, you're going to have to pop off any adjoining of these, and you can do that just with a pair of pliers. You'll just need to grab onto it with a pair of pliers and then wiggle it back and forth until it breaks off. I don't know why they have that installed that way, but it's the only way to get two switches to fit the right width apart so you can fit them in a double gang box. So just be aware of that. I did get tripped up installing smart switches when I first moved in. I didn't do that, and I was wondering why the heck wouldn't this thing fit in the box. So just be aware. So go ahead and make sure that those screws make contact with the holes in the box. I usually like to get the switch at least in and just tighten down so there's no loose wires hanging out. And then I will typically go back and test the switch before I tighten everything back up again, because there's been too many times where I've accidentally forgotten something and I've had to take everything off the wall again, and that's just a pain. So I'll go ahead and come over here. And now we see the blue lights lit. So that indicates that there is power. The switch is powered up. You can now search and find it using your home automation system. And the light should function. See? There we go. So now the switch is fully set up and ready to go. So now we'll move on, and I'll show you how to get it, how I actually install it in a real world situation. All right, so the first step here is we need to go ahead and remove the faceplate from the existing switches. So if you notice that there's actually two circuits here, you want to ensure that both of these circuits are off. So you want to test both switches in this case. I have had an issue in the past where one of the switches in a box was on a different circuit, and I actually was shocked because of that. So make sure that you're checking both switches before you dig in behind here. So we'll go ahead and take the non-contact and run it across all the lugs on both switches. And now that we confirm power is off, we can go ahead and safely remove the switch we're replacing. Another item to be aware of is sometimes the neutral will be pressed behind the adjacent switch. So you may have to go in and remove the second switch, which I'm going to go ahead and do right now. So to get access to that neutral bundle, we'll go ahead and remove the other switch from this panel. Now we've got access to the neutral bundle. I did notice that this wire nut was the wrong size for a 5-conductor setup, since I already had 4 conductors in the box itself. So I went ahead and grabbed one of these orange 5-conductor wire nuts and swapped that out and added in the additional pigtail that I needed to wire in the neutral on the smart switch. Now we'll go ahead and remove the line and load from the existing switch. And again, make sure you remember which one is the line versus the load, so that way you can wire it up correctly. Then go ahead and match those to the correct locations on the back of the smart switch, and then tighten those lugs down. This can vary by different types of smart switches, but most of them have the pass-through with the lug you can tighten down. Now go ahead and grab the neutral and do the same with it. Wire it into the neutral location. And then go ahead, and the final step will be to grab the ground connector from the existing switch and pass it through the back of the ground lug on the smart switch, and then get that tightened down and ready to go. So now once all of the items have been tightened down and secured, we'll go ahead and push the bundle back into the box itself and get the smart switch lined up to tighten down. Now be careful when you're tightening these down, they might end up popping out of the box. Before you secure the other switch, make sure that none of the ground wires are touching any of the lugs on the side of either switch. Now that we've got everything secured against the wall, let's go ahead and flip power back onto the breaker and test each of the switches. Now, I went ahead and tested the one in the stairwell first, making sure that worked, and then you'll notice the blue light is now on with the smart switch. So that indicates there's power and the smart switch is functioning correctly. So we'll go ahead and turn on the lights in the room, which you can't see from this angle here, and confirm everything is good to go. So now that we know the power is on to everything, let's go ahead and secure the switches and then put the faceplate back on. Now you've got a completely installed smart switch. All right, so there you go. Hopefully this video was helpful getting you set up with a smart switch in your house. If you do run into an issue, please feel free to reach out in the comments or on the Discord. And I'd love to see how you all are using your smart switches if you have a unique setup in your house. I'm using relays, dimmers, fan modules in my house. So I've got quite a few of them. So if you do have a question, feel free to reach out. And thanks again for watching and have the best week.